We've always tried to take the best player available to us. I think we've shown that over the last number of years. No, we'll take the best players available to us, regardless of position.
This incredibly crazy hockey season has come to a close. The Tampa Bay Lightning earned a Stanley Cup championship, and next up on the agenda is the NHL Draft, October 6th and October 7th. What's up, Caps fans? It is time for another podcast here on Facebook as I get ready to launch my new podcast. There will be details coming soon, which you'll be able to download and access however you get your podcast. So stay tuned for the lookout for that. But today, the Capitals actually made their assistant GM, Ross Mahoney, available to talk about the upcoming draft and some of the top prospects that they've drafted recently. So I got Tarik El-Bashir from The Athletic and Ben Raby from Caps Radio to join me and kind of break down what we heard. And Tarik, I'll start with you because the interesting thing about kind of where the hockey world is, it's not the Caps, but where the hockey world is that they've had to kind of do this. As Ross said,
I became a Zoomer. I was not a Zoomer before, but now I'm a Zoomer as far as doing all these interviews.
I'm a Zoomer now. He's doing all these Zoom interviews, which doesn't allow you to really get a sense of a kid. And I know that they value the type of person that these kids are as much as the talent in a lot of ways. So how do you think that's going to affect the Caps or GMs certainly this year with this draft?
I think it's going to have an impact. Anyone who's had to conduct business over Zoom or Google Meet or Hangout, whatever it's called, and there's something that's lost in translation between in that human interaction when there's a screen between the person you're talking to. I've been fortunate over the course of my career to actually have sat in some of those prospect interviews where, Mahoney grills the player and there's another scout in the room and maybe the general manager is also there. And I think there's a lot that can be gleaned. Now, of course, I wasn't participating. I was just as a media member observing for a feature we were working on. But I think a lot can be gleaned from body language. And does a guy look nervous? And, how at ease is he around, important people? What's that handshake like? I mean, there's a lot of things you can learn from meeting an 18-year-old kid that you're trying to project where he's going to be when he's 22 years old, right? So, you need all the information you can gather. And, I'm looking at you with that scraggly beard. You don't look as trustworthy, in Zoom. I don't know. There's just stuff that gets lost in translation. So, and Ross was very upfront about it. Guys, he said it wasn't the same. There was definitely stuff you had to leave to the imagination. So it'll be curious to see. I can guarantee you someone's going to pick someone in the first round that turns into a bust. And they're going to go, yep. To meet him face to face.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you took a shot at me because I was going to take one at you by saying that you weren't one of those important people in the room when you said you
I was like a fly on the wall in the back.
But you drew first blood, so I respect that. That's how we roll together. I understand that. But Ben, there's probably something to that because while Tarik has gotten that opportunity, we've had, when I worked at NBC Sports Washington, we've had the cameras inside those rooms, not necessarily for the upcoming draft, but once the kids are there. And whether it's the coach telling we're sending you back or, whatever we've had the access to, there have been times where I've come away from those and been like, that kid handled himself well, or that kid looked overwhelmed in the moment. And at that point, it's already the Caps' property, so it's on them to work with it. But I think there is something to the fact of just being able, like here, you're right. I didn't shave. I got a baseball hat on. Ben, you're in like a bunker. It looks like you haven't brushed your hair in a couple of weeks. So but that's what the world is in Zoom. Everyone's doing it really, really casually because that's just, no one really cares anymore. So it's totally different than either basically going on a job interview. I've met with people during my downtime now, and I try and put on like right now, at least a nice golf shirt, and then the person pops up on Zoom.
Oh my God.
Right, the person pops up on Zoom who I'm meeting with, and they're in a baseball hat, haven't shaved, their dog sitting on their lap. I'm like, wow, this is a weird world we live in now.
And here's the thing too. Ross is acknowledging, and I'm sure other GMs and scouts around the league will echo this when they do perhaps return to a combine as early as next year. They'll look forward to being back in that environment. Whereas look, we're joking about this with Zoom and working from home. A lot of folks, or some folks, depending on the industry, have said, hey, they've gotten used to this. They found advantages, and they don't have to commute anymore, whatever it is. Some folks in some industries are saying, hey, they've learned to adjust and they can live with this moving forward. Ross Mahoney clearly saying, no, there's a whole lot of value in the interview process and everything else that goes into the combine experience. And it's interesting, Tarik's experience being in the room. I've heard a lot of stories from Brian Burke over the years that he shared now that he's a member of the media, just things that you learn from the players, exactly from the mannerisms, from how they carry themselves. I've heard a positive from prospects is when they flip it and they start asking you questions about your organization. Some teams get impressed by that. I don't know if they're on Zoom. Is it a quick 5-minute hit? Are they settling in? Are they, is the interaction the same? So certainly there's lots that can be gleaned from an in-person interview, which, yeah, as Ross said, it's a lot harder when it comes to the internet these days.
They also didn't see the playoffs. I mean, a lot of these developmental leagues, were cut short, and that's where you get to see, the true mettle of a 18-year-old. The guys who rise up. So not only off the ice, but I think on the ice too. I think a lot was missed by this coronavirus stoppage.
So we evaluate this draft in 5-6 years, and then you'll see. Like, I'm being serious here. You compare it to other drafts, and you see, all right, how much of a difference did that make on the scouting, on all the research that went into it? Was it, for the most part, consistent with other years, or was that 2020 year just complete, you've got third-rounders that are the superstars,
Well, if they're not putting an asterisk next to the Stanley Cup title, then there's no asterisk. Guys' jobs are on the line, whether or not there's a pandemic or you had to do these interviews on Zoom. So they're going to grade these the same way. But you talked about, so look, we don't know what the Caps are going to do at 24 with the draft. They've had a couple of hits late in the first round. Clearly,
they're going to take a Russian.
that's your pick. But certainly to go back to last year's number one pick, and again, there's somewhat of a hype around the draft for the Caps because it's the draft, and you're hopefully drafting someone who's going to help you in the future. But with the Caps, it's always the end of the first round, so you don't really know the kid. Last year, it seemed like they hit a home run with Connor McMichael. And, you asked him about McMichael, Tarik, and first off, they did not loan him out. So whereas Alexander Alexiev is playing in the KHL, Alexi Protas, who's got a couple of goals already and an assist in the KHL, has been loaned out. McMichael's not. And he said that, Ross Mahoney said,
getting stronger is something they really need to do in order to be able to, come in and compete in the future against these NHL players, who are obviously men and they have that man strength.
He's interested in seeing how Connor comes to camp next year. The thing I found it interesting in an earlier question, though, he said, he's going to go up against grown men with grown men's strength when he gets called up, and the kid's got to get bigger and a little stronger. So surprised that they're not loaning him out to just be playing, or would you rather see him stay away from potentially getting injured in the KHL or something like that and just be ready for whenever this camp is going to be with the Caps?
Well, the team made a little news right after we got off the call with Mahoney. Bobby Nardella got sent over to Sweden, I believe.
Yep.
That was a little different than the previous loans. That was for the entire year, but also it wasn't a guy staying in his homeland, basically. With Alexiev and Protas, those are two guys who are from that part of the world joining a team that obviously plays in that part of the world. I think there's more of a learning curve if you were to lend a kid from Ajax, Ontario, to a team in Russia. I think that'd be a pretty stark change of pace for that player. So when I think about McMichael not being loaned out, you haven't seen many North American kids head that direction yet. Now, I think as we get a clearer picture, guys, of what December, January, whatever whenever these developmental leagues are going to start, whether they are going to start on time, I think you're going to see some guys headed over there. My feeling is that top guys like McMichael, I think, he was in the bubble. He was there for a long, for a decent amount of time with the Caps. I think they really do want to, kind of get him as quickly as possible back with the Capitals group instead of needing to recall him, just to see what he can do. So I know it's kind of a long-winded way of explaining why he probably wasn't shipped over, but I don't see it unless, like, for example, like the OHL just can't go. Like Canada just says, OHL, sorry, you're done for the year, or you can't start till January, February, March. And let's be honest, guys, the virus is in control here. We can't, we predict the virus lasts. So we'll have to figure out, see how things go.
And real quick, the thing about loaning the players too, I feel like it's much different. On the one hand, it reminds me of during the lockout year when you have the established veteran pros go overseas to various teams. These are kids, though, who I would imagine the team wants to keep a close eye on, wants to have a hold on what they're doing. And I feel like this is almost the Wild West. Yes, I'm sure they have relationships with the various teams and management teams that they're loaning them to. But I know a couple of teams, I think the LA Kings are one that they have an ownership share. It might be a team in the German league, so they happen to be loaning a number of prospects to that one team in that league. But this is, you're loaning players, and the best part for management and the scouts in September, when you have the prospect camp and they're all under one roof, is they're under your watch and you have a hold of them and you know who's doing what and who's weighing what and who's eating what. And this is just,
and there's no pandemic in your building either. I mean, the KHL is having a tough time right now. Let's be honest.
Exactly. Right? Yeah, absolutely. Overseas. Yeah. That's a story in itself. But it just, for McMichael to be as highly touted as he is, with the aspirations that they have in the short term, not to mention the long term, just to keep him a little closer to home. Certainly that there could be value to that. You just wonder how long, to your point, he could go without actual game action.
And I wonder if it changes, if those development leagues, if the OHL is not going to play, you would, I guess you'd have to hope, at least, if not expect, that the NHL expands rosters so they can get these kids at least in with the big club to work out, to practice. And I think, Ben, it might alter, because last year, I think Brian McClellan and the organization was very clear that they did not want to rush that kid. They did not want to put him in a situation where he's not ready for it, and now maybe his development gets stunted. I wonder if this whole thing and the uncertainty with the minor leagues maybe changes how they're viewing it. And maybe they do say, if they were going to expand rosters, or if there's no place for him to play, like, all right, let's see how the kid does now. Like, there could be some openings there.
He still has another year of junior. He can go back and play junior. Connor had an excellent year last year. I'm trying to remember the numbers, maybe 102 points in 54 games, I think, which was a tremendous season. Had that played out over, the regular number of games, he probably would have been in that 130 point range. Contributed in Canada's World Junior team, gold medal team. He scored in that tournament also. Curious to see this, like I said before, the gains he's going to make strength-wise. I think that's probably one of the biggest things for him, is to get stronger.
Yeah, and I wonder too, if it's an abbreviated season, which it would seem it would be, does that 9-game audition, does that sample size change? Because if not, all right, at least you get them in for 8-9 games, see what you have, and as it turns out, that might be 20% of your regular season anyways. So at least get them into training camp, whatever a preseason might look like, a game or two, and at least give them a look at the big boy level.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I haven't heard anything about potential for expanded rosters. I think everyone's just kind of waiting to see what's going to happen with those developmental leagues. I mean, I know, like, some of the other leagues, I believe the USHL is like getting ready to crank back up here. So, it's going to be really, really interesting to see how this unfolds. And like I said, we just don't know. I mean, if I had to guess, guys, I would say McMichael starts the season on the Capitals, and then heads to London if there is an OHL season before they burn a year of his entry-level contract. Or if he comes up and he scores 3 goals or 4 goals in those first, I mean, it's a team that needs to get younger and faster, but then you get into the whole situation where, okay, well, now do you flush a contract to Hershey, or, like what do you do? Because right now they've got, 11 forwards under contract for next year. My sources have told me that, one of their wants in free agency is going to be a middle 6 winger. I mean, if they go get someone there, now that's 12. does McMichael push, someone out of the lineup? You can see that there's not a whole lot of room. I think, so what is this, the 30th? I think we're going to have some pretty good answers to this by like the third day into free agency. We'll see what they do with that middle six spot. If it doesn't get filled, okay, maybe they're going to see what he can do.
A couple of quick things. One is, and again, it's all moving parts. We don't know dates, but OHL is at least publicly targeting a December return.
Yeah, it's the 4th, I believe, yeah.
I think from an NHL perspective, that would be far too optimistic. Maybe he at least gets his feet wet back in the OHL and then could hit the NHL ground running. And the other thing, to your point, Tarik, looking at also with expanding the roster, I don't know, given the salary cap restraints, how you get that done to suggest you start expanding the roster when so many teams are saying, hey, we don't want to spend this much money this year. And I guess the other thing, as far as the roster construction, this is going into some detail now, but when they needed center depth in the postseason last summer against the Islanders, we saw Brian Pinot get in. Sort of thought, all right, maybe that may have been too much too soon for McMichael, but Pinot was there. Pinot, remind me, a 2-year contract. The first year for him here is still 2 away. So you could play with that, right? I mean, I'm just looking down the depth chart.
Right, sure.
Who you're potentially looking at. How do you create the potential spot? That seems like a possibility without knowing what free agency holds.
Yeah, and don't forget Daniel Sprong just got signed to a 1-way contract too. So that's another winger that has scored some goals in the league and is young and could bring some of that youthful exuberance to the lineup that they've been missing.
Yeah, and Ross Mahoney was asked about that and said that they see Sprong as a potential bottom 6 type of guy.
Replacement, in my opinion.
Right. And he's a guy who scored at this level. He's played at this level. So he can. It's not going to overwhelm him. There is a part of me that would love to see McMichael get an opportunity at some point because the league is going so young and it's going small and fast.
Yeah.
So, I know that the Caps are hesitant because they don't want to put the kid in a situation where he can, get hurt. But so many of these teams are going young, fast, small. It's not the same world anymore. The Caps play a heavy game, and maybe in the playoffs it becomes a heavy game. But I think the kid could probably acquit himself a little bit if given the opportunity. And I know for damn sure Caps fans would be excited by it.
There isn't a whole lot to be excited about right now, but that's something I think fans could get pretty pumped about.
And there's the headline for the podcast.
he's the biggest storyline, Rob. What do we do on the Prospect podcast after that? What are we doing? You need speculation. I'm being serious here. When they were going into the bubble, one of the biggest storylines after we spoke to general manager Brian McClellan, I think this was still in April or May before the plans had been solidified, right? He piqued everyone's interest when he said, Connor McMichael's going to come with us.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
for sure. Yeah, they haven't had as exciting a prospect who tore it up. I've been covering the team for 9 years. There hasn't been a single because they've been a Stanley Cup contender every single year, and they're so loaded. But this is the first kid that you're like, oh. Like Jacob Vrana, there was some excitement, but this kid tore up the OHL. So I get it. One of the other interesting things I thought to come out of the Ross Mahoney conversation was his thoughts on potentially starting a season with Ilya Samsonov and Vitek Vanacek.
How comfortable or maybe not would the organization be with 2 goalies with that little NHL experience in Samsonov and Vanacek?
I think Samsonov played very well last year, given his opportunity. And like I said, Vitek has done well. Those are decisions that, like you said, will be made here, in the near future. But if that's the direction that it did go, I would be very confident in both those young players.
He's obviously not going to speak to going out and signing a Thomas Greiss type player. Maybe they bring in HENRIK LUNDQVIST now because he was released by the Rangers.
Ben was excited on our group text thread last night.
Oh, is that right?
You got to kick the tires on that, right?
Yeah, you got to ask.
What would he be willing to play for?
I think that would be intriguing. I'm in the camp. I think most folks are in the camp that, right, you got to bring in a veteran. And to that point, do you bring in the traditional backup goalie, the lifelong backup goalie Capitals had one years ago in Justin Peters. You know what that is. It's just, as Barry Trotz used to say, he gets the junk mail games, and you know who the undisputed number one is. You could go that route, or do you go the route of former number one with the pedigree who can, maybe in New York it's uncomfortable to play the mentorship role, but maybe you could do so.
It's the biggest question they face, in my opinion. Not necessarily Vanacek versus Lundqvist. Wait, did I just say that? No, I mean, not
Okay,
just,
strike that. There's the headline.
not just young unproven backup versus. It's how do you put that situation together? They've handed the reins to Samsonov now. By all indications, it looks like he has recovered from the upper body injury that he suffered while riding an ATV in Russia. So he's good to go. He's going to be their number one. The question is, do you want a 35-year-old, who knows he's not going to play a whole lot, but is there to mentor and support and get the 25 junk mail games? I mean, is that how you want to go? And I know Samsonov was not super happy last year, kind of, even when they were kind of platooning and going back and forth, he felt like he should have been playing more. And so that was tough on him mentally. And so knowing what you know about his mental makeup, do you want to bring in the HENRIK Lundqvist and say, okay, kid, here's your job. Hall of Famer who's back. I mean, could you imagine what that would feel like if you're saying, well, I sort of got the job in name, but I got this dude behind me who's really accomplished. I don't know. I think it's a very fine line that they've got to walk. And I've heard everything in checking with my sources, man. They've kicked tires on some, they're starting to look ahead to the free agent market. They also have talked about maybe even bringing in, a lower level veteran guy who just kind of holds Vitek's spot until he's ready to kind of come up and be the full-time guy. There is a faction inside the organization that believes Vitek's earned his opportunity.
Well, the interesting thing, and first off, I got to get on this group text. It sounds fantastic.
You'd be awesome. I don't know why you're not on it.
How am I not on this thing?
As soon as we get off this.
He didn't invite you there. You're going to get messages, Rob. Be careful what you wish for.
Right. No doubt.
Messages at all
you can walk
times
away
of
from
the
your
day.
phone for 5 minutes, and there's like an entire conversation that is unfolded.
Yeah. No, I will immediately regret that decision, but I feel like it could be some fun. But the fact that you could potentially, if they were going to go after HENRIK Lundqvist, and could you imagine after all the playoff battles and after all the failures and the Game 7 magic from HENRIK Lundqvist over the years, to actually see him in a Caps uniform would blow people's minds.
I'm trying to picture it now.
They brought Yaroslav Halak back to DC in 2014. That was odd.
Dude.
That was awkward.
That was really weird.
And there's more history with Lundqvist.
Enough time has passed. They have their cup. It's a little different.
Still be weird.
Still be weird.
But
you know what, fellas, real quick, just on that. Mark Stahl was traded last week. HENRIK Lundqvist bought out. Saw Ryan McDonough raise the Stanley Cup the other day. To your point, Caps and everyone thinks Caps Penguins, and for good reason. But the Caps and Rangers.
oh,
Man,
dude.
you both covered those series. They had battles, right? They met in the playoffs, I think, 5 times in 7 years. And that whole team of Rangers, Chris Kreider is the only one left. That whole,
Yeah.
and it's not that far, 6, 7 years ago.
Yeah.
They're gone.
Yeah.
They're gone.
And basically the whole Caps core is still together. Like that's
Enough of them. Yeah.
enough of them. Yeah, the core guys. The core guys are still together.
Yeah.
But Lundqvist, I think the interesting thing though is he understands where he is, right? He didn't publicly come out last year. Shesterkin took that role and became the guy.
But he's in control of his destiny now, right? So now,
Oh, for sure. But I'm just saying he knows how to deal with that.
But something tells me he's going to want to go somewhere
100%.
last year or two where he's going to be a platoon or like a 1A. He's going to I just don't know if the Capitals are going to want to hand that to him, given the fact that they've got this 2015 first rounder that at some point they gotta just give him the job. So
I don't see it happening. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, you're the one that just said Lundqvist is going to beat out Samsonov.
Possibility.
It's an intriguing possibility for sure.
I think he checks the boxes. The question from his perspective is, do the Capitals check the boxes? And to Tarik's point, that's not necessarily the case.
Right. It would be interesting to see. Part of me, though, honestly, look, it's his life. He probably feels he's got more wins in him. To me, I would love to see him just walk away. I hate seeing those guys at the end of the career in another uniform, or even potentially he signs 1 year somewhere and then signs another year somewhere else, and now he's played 3.
Lightning.
Yeah,
they're so competitive to that point. Ole Kolzig with Tampa. You've spoken to him, Tarik, about that. I mean, in retrospect,
he regrets it. Yeah.
In retrospect, but at the time, your competitor. You gotta.
Yeah, no, he wants to play. He has every right. He's earned the right to make his own decision. But Wayne Gretzky in a Blues uniform? Do we really
Brady
want
with the Bucks? I mean, there's a lot of things. It's just like
Seattle supersonic Patrick Ewing.
Right.
That's right. Yeah.
Don't want that. Before I let you guys go, thoughts on the Stanley Cup, which I thought was wildly entertaining. I'm happy that Steven Stamkos went out in full uniform and accepted that Stanley Cup and got his, whatever, I don't know, 4 feet forward and 4 feet back. It wasn't really a lap around the rink. He just kind of glided out. Yeah, glided out and glided back in. But I love that he got his moment, right, with the team. I thought Tampa was the best team. Congrats on getting the monkey off their back from last year and coming back. And the job that Julian Brisebois did getting tougher and sacrificing first-round picks for Blake Coleman and Barclay Goodrow, and just getting tougher, harder to play against. He didn't win GM of the year. He probably should have, though, for the things that he did. Didn't even mention getting Maroon and Shattenkirk.
Yeah.
But in addition to that, just the overall performance by the NHL to pull that thing off without a sing. I mean, we're seeing now, the news just came out, the Steelers and Titans is postponed now. The Titans have some COVID issues. The NBA pretty much went flawless too, but just a great job, I thought, by the league and by their TV partners. It was a pretty spectacular TV show all the way through. I think that I just thought they did a great job.
I agree. I was skeptical at the outset. Once the bubble was explained to me a little better, I got a feeling that, hey, maybe they will be able to see this to completion. The competition was good. It was still jarring for me every night to not see fans in the building. That did not ever kind of go away from me. That said, the NHL was handed a hand of pretty bad cards, and they made the most of it. And for that, they should be congratulated. And look, the Lightning probably should have won last year, so it was kind of cool to see a team that stumbled, a la Virginia men's basketball that first year, to come back and do it all the next year. It's funny, even though I've covered the Capitals for most of my career, there are a couple of teams that kind of organizations that I've always kind of I've had a soft spot for because of where I was in my career. So, first it was the Islanders. That was the first team I ever covered, and just what they went through in the late 90s. So I always kind of, I'm always interested in how they're doing. I always check up on them. And the other's the Lightning. The first Stanley Cup final that I ever covered was 2004 when they beat Calgary in Game 7 in an awesome series. So, I'm always, I don't say pulling for them, but always interested and happy to see them do well too. So, congrats to the NHL. I just hope they can figure out work some more magic for the 2020-2021 season coming up here. But they got some smart people. They've got some blueprints to look at as far as college sports and Major League Baseball and football. I think they're going to figure it out. I just, I'm curious to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, what impressed me with the whole thing, the NHL, and I think maybe casual sports fans may not fully appreciate this, they're proving to be very good at staging events. You think about the outdoor games and the setup and literally sets that they put together.
Yeah.
They put 2 sets together in Toronto and in Edmonton. And if you were flipping the channels watching TV, not only did you not notice the empty seats, but with all those lights and the scoreboards in the background, it was very visually appealing. It was visually inviting if you were watching TV, and the quality of play was outstanding, and the format ended up being great. We were wondering, how would those round robin teams ultimately fare? I think 3 of the 4 semifinalists were, the top seeds in their conference, and ultimately Tampa Bay, a legitimate contender at the start of the year, and Dallas, some folks predicted they would have a deep run in the Western Conference. It was a great great showing. And I say this kind of jokingly, I just found that ultimately the Stanley Cup presentation to be missing a little something. You referenced Steven Stamkos took a little twirl. I thought that was just a little unfortunate because everything else about the whole event was so great, and kudos to them. I think other leagues, if it translates, should be going to the NHL and saying, give us your playbook, because it worked so extraordinarily well in a unique circumstance, which obviously cannot be duplicated in a regular season, but thought it was outstanding the way they handled it the past few months.
It was missing something without the fans, without seeing the fans banging on the glass as the guys skate by. But again, that was the fact going into it. So we knew that was going to be, again, at the TV show they put on, and, my buddy who lives in the neighborhood here in Annapolis is the director for NBC. And he said right away, this is now a TV show. So how do we put on the best TV show we can? I thought they did a great job, and it is still the best trophy in sports. And, it's still that promo a couple of years ago when they, and they were like, it's
speechless one.
Yeah. I mean, hearing all the guys just be like, I don't, like those are just great moments. Victor Hedman could barely speak. Stamkos could barely speak. It's just really, really awesome stuff. So, but as Tarik said, good job, NHL. What's next?
Right. Keep me employed.
Right, exactly. Hey, you're hitting close to home there, buddy. You're hitting very close to home. Well, hopefully there'll be, again, an announcement coming soon on a new Capitals podcast. So please look out for that. You'll be able to download it however you get your podcast. So that announcement should be coming soon. But I'm glad to keep putting out content here on this quote-unquote podcast here on Facebook. Thanks to my good buddies Tarik, El-Bashir, and Ben Raby for joining me to talk a little Caps draft, Caps future, and review the Stanley Cup. So thanks again. Look for that podcast information. I'm Rob Carlin. We will talk again soon.